I set my alarm clock for 1:15 a.m. Say mazal tov to you. To say to you all. To you all. Period. But nobody's on Zoom. So, mazal tov and Shabbat Shalom. And I'm going back to sleep. I am going back to sleep.
Okay, buckets of everybody. Let me just turn this around. Hang on, I'm not there yet. Sorry, I'm a bad tech person.
Hey, Susan, you here?
No, I'm not Susan.
You're gonna have to hold it the whole time.
You're not Susan. You sound like Sarah.
It's great to be here, and
this?
it's great to see all of you again. And
pass me my
hopefully
camera.
I'll see you a couple times next week. And next Shabbat we're going to do our traditional. You know, we've had a bunch of
Let me see how it might be hot.
Tisha B'av on Shabbat
Gotta
or
be
Sundays in the last few years. You notice that? And so every time we did a double daf on Shabbos. So last year, when none of us were getting together, it was in the middle of the week. We're back to that. So we'll do a double daf on Shabbat. Anyhow, for those of you who we haven't met, it's like at Shalom. Nice to meet you. It's been a pleasure to be part of this year for years. And it's very exciting to be part of the Siyum. Thank you for inviting me. And Masachet Yoma. By the way, what does the word Yoma mean? As long as we finish it, we'll make sure we know what we're talking about. What?
Find out
Good day. Right.
End.
Yoma is Hayom. Exactly. And there's only one Yom that's Hayom, and that's Yom Kippurim. And Masachet Yoma, as you remember, begins, because it's important when you're making a siyum to also make sure you get the bigger picture. Masachet Yoma begins, of course, with Prishat Kohen Gadol, the Kohen Gadol separating from his family for 7 days, and the whole sugya at the beginning, where we get that from Miluim, Paraduma, etc., and all of the separation issue. But the motivation for the separation, of course, is to avoid any tumah. And the idea is that we'll do the best that we can to keep him away from tumah, so that he will not have to call out the understudy right at the last minute. We do ma'im mei chatat on him every one of those 7 days, in case that happens to be day 3 or 7 of his tumat mate that he might have had. We cover all the bases. And yet, what is the reason that we have the Kohen Gadol have a lighter machta on Yom Kippur than every other day? Just as an example. I'm going to take you on a little tour through Yomi, because we don't want to say goodbye with it. What? Why do I make it easier for him? Why? Yeah. He has a lot of work to do. That's A. B, he's very likely
He's
in his 80s,
he's been up all night.
right? He's been up all night. That's the part I want to get to. He's hungry, but he's been up all night. Why has he been up all night? Because they would keep him up. If he could, and I want to see how pathetic this statement is. If he was capable, he would give shear all night. But I want you to hear the opening part of that. If he was capable. If he was not capable, then somebody else would give shear. Which, by the way, as we've all learned over this past year of Zoom, is a great recipe for falling asleep. Sitting and listening to somebody else give a shear, right? But very likely they would call on him and, say read and whatever, right? If he knew Torah Sheba'al Peh, fine. If he didn't, I want you to picture what a tragic statement that is about the reality of the Kuna Gdola at the end of Bayit Sheni. That you have to deal with people who were possibly illiterate, possibly fully ignorant, and of course, possibly if they were not illiterate or ignorant, that they were secretly tztokim. So we weren't dealing with, somebody whose tu'udah we would necessarily eat at that restaurant, right? It's important to note that about the Kohen Gadol. So there's Masachet Yoma bounces back and forth between the idyllic image of the Kohen Gadol and the reality of the Kohen Gadol. And the reality and the idyllic image are not the same, right? So it's important to keep that in mind. Okay, so it's interesting that the Masachet ends with this kind of squeamish note that goes back to the issue of Tumah and goes back to the issue of the concern that we had. But now, since the last parak has moved away from the Kohen Gadol, has moved away from the Beit HaMikdash, has moved out to Alon Shvut and to Los Angeles and to Johannesburg and everywhere else, and it's the only parak on which many of the Rishonim have a comment. The Rishonim who are like poskim, like the Rif. There's no Rif on anything until the 8th parak. 8th parak, boom, because it's all the practicum for us. And so the Masachet ends. I'm going to pick it up at Tani Tana Kamed Rav Nachman, because I really would like to do this part quickly. Tani Tana Kamed Rav Nachman, Haroy Kerev Yom Kippurim Avonotav Mechulin Lo. Now, this of course is in sharp contrast with the Kohen Gadol, because if the Kohen Gadol had this situation, I hope everybody understands what it is. If not, look at your translation. I ain't saying it. If the Kohen Gadol had this situation, we would be ach and we would be vei. But an individual man who sees a Keren Yom Kippurim, then avonotav mechulin lo. Oh, very good. It's a great sign. Very strange. Tanya avonotav misidurin lo. Now, sidurin sounds like his avirot are all just lined up for him, and it's like he's in terrible trouble, right? And so they say, my sidurin li machel. Now, this is a bit of a stretch to say avonotav sidurin means everything is lined up like dominoes, just ready to knock them over, as opposed to sidurin lo, like, you got this over here and that over here. In other words, how are they interpreting this event? And the notion is this is an event that was not of his own doing, but it's an event that happened while he was asleep. And he wakes up in the morning or in the middle of the night and realizes this has happened. How is he supposed to interpret it? And what we have is two opposite traditions of how to interpret it, which, of course, if we wanted to, we could explain them as being, well, it depends. If the night before he was behaving like they were behaving in Nahar Deah, I don't know if you remember that story, then Avonotav Sidurin lo, right? On the other hand, if he was sitting and learning and he was saying Tehillim and saying those 4 chapters of Tehillim you're supposed to say to protect against this, and it happened, then Avonotav Mechulin lo, you could say that. They don't want to do that. They want to have everything be clean here. So they said that Mesidurim means Sidurin li machel, not lined up for you to deal with, but lined up to not be knocked down. Okay. Now, Tanav Rabbi Shmuel, Harek Yom Kippurim Yid'ad Kol Hashana Kula. All right, now this is a little bit of a strange statement, because Yid'ad Kol Hashana Kula means meaning if you were to take it literally, it means I'm in mortal fear all year. It doesn't mean that. It means keep an eye out for the rest of the year. You'll see why. Because in other words, keep an eye out for the rest of the year. And if you now have a full year where that doesn't happen, then you know that retroactively, that was a really good sign. If on the other hand, it doesn't hold up, then that means that this was really an indication of something bad to happen. And there's a lot of this kind of feeling, what? Again? You're right, exactly. So that's what I was saying. So if you remember, we had a little earlier in the parak, they had the thing about getting bitten by right? So if you get bitten by a
mad dog? No.
It's a mad dog, right? Then if you rub against it, you're going to be in suffering. If you get bit, you're going to die. So then what's the solution? The solution is it's simple. What's the solution if you're going to die? Oh, so you do X, Y, and Z, and you thing, and you bury it, like the thing, and you bury it, and for 12 months you make 12 months. These are 12 months. So it means you're going to die, but it means theoretically there's death out there waiting for you, and you've got this fix in the meantime. And if you're able to successfully keep the thing locked up in the lead glass and all that for a year, then you'll be okay. Again, this whole thing about waiting 12 months to find out if you're dead is kind of a curious thing. Anyhow, this is, by the way, how guys typically deal with Gemara like this. It's a little bit. I'm not Rav Yitzchak. Right. So what's the sign that he's a ben olam haba? Is that everybody else is doing without, and he, in the middle of the night, did not do without, right? And the idea is that it's life. And so this is a sign of life. Again, there's so much behind all of this that is, first of all, uncomfortable to talk about. Second of all, there's so much behind this that's also way beyond my ken about what the symbolism of it is and how it was perceived. And that even impacts on sugyot that we've done together here and it's always based on whatever time of year I get here, but in Masechet Shvuot and Masechet Midah about how to understand this kind of phenomenon. But in any case, that's what it says. And so, but one last note about this is that people would often take things that happened on Yom Kippur as a sign. I remember hearing the Rav say in near live here on the very famous Balot Chashir, maybe the most famous year the Rav ever gave, where he talked about the Yom Kippur of '66. He was one of the two people in Maimonides shul who would hold the Sefer Torah for Kol Nidre. They gave it back to the Gabbai to bring it back into the Aron, put it in the Aron, and it almost fell. Didn't fall, it almost fell, and they had to adjust it. And he said, I had a gefiel. How do you say gefiel? No, yeah, I know. Viz Ochman, a gefiel. Right. I had a bad feel.
Premonition.
And of course, that was the year that he had three, his mother and his wife and his brother all died during the coming year. And he attributed it, he didn't attribute it to that, but he said that was like a sign to him. So there's a strong feeling that things that happen on Yom Kippur are kind of signs for what's coming up that year. And even though most of it we can't understand and are beyond our knowledge, sometimes something creeps through. So that seems to be what this is about. Bye.
Brucha haba.
But the whole Valkyrie incident is interesting because that's what we were preventing about the Kohen Gadol.
Right, I mentioned that. Yeah. I was tying the beginning of the Masechet to the end. Right.
Right. The whole
Yeah.
concept of carry and mikra, and it makes a lot of sense to. It can go both ways in people's
Yeah.
understandings of how life is.
Absolutely.
And therefore it's a
Look,
great
there's the
thing
Gemara
for
in
the giver.
Brachot that talks about Elisha visiting the Shunamit. And the Shunamit says to her husband, Ish Kadoshu. Says Milan. So one opinion is that women know that they know about their guests. The other one was she would put a sheet out for him and she never saw Carrie. Right? Which I don't know, to many people's but all right. So, but in any case, there's a lot of it throughout Chazal and in different ways. And it shows, of course, in medieval mystical literature also, lots about what it is.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure.
One thing?
Of course.
I'm sure we as women have all noticed when you say the Tefillah Zakah, there's a lot of emphasis on this. And it's not a positive one.
No, it's not.
So where did that, flip?
Right. So like I said, it's beyond my ken, but I think you have to, if you want to, there are people who've written about this. And I think a lot of it starts in late medieval mysticism, very likely starting in France and Germany and Ashkenaz. Right. And with the influence where that came from, there's a lot of interesting literature on that also. Right. Well, not
there's
exactly.
a positive spin to it.
Yeah,
That's what she's questioning.
Correct,
But there's also a
correct.
negative spin.
Tefillah Zakah is not a year later. That's the thing. It's not like Right. And so, but I think one of the things that Rabbi Shmuel is doing here is it's right, or the way that the Rav Yizt right, so that this whole piece is going is and it seems like the way that Rav Nachman perhaps is interpreting the two pieces is that it's taking something that could be inherently seen as a negative, saying theoretically it could be a positive, and there's ways symbolically to interpret it as positive, right? And so that, in a sense, increases the mystery of the din. In other words, if you were to, let's say, just slam dunk, say this is a terrible thing, a person could wake up Yom Kippur morning and say, that's it, I'm going out and have a cheeseburger because I'm finished. I'm already dead man anyways. I'm not saying somebody's going to say that, but you know, so it could be that this is saying, not so quick, you don't know what it means. Could mean this, could mean that. And the truth is that, you know, Hashem Pitronim, and you're not necessarily in charge of all that information. There's reasons to be concerned about it. But on the other hand, it, you know, depending on how the rest of your life plays out, could be theoretically good. But you're right, it's Philozaka doesn't
support.
Okay, I don't know what your common custom is in post-corona world under the H with a Siyum. I assume you do this all the time. But I don't know how much of the Siyum
We're saying the Hadran?
We're gonna say the
recital.
Hadran.
Okay, you guys say the
Yeah.
Hadran. Good. Okay, and then
we'll start.
you'll get some food and I'll.
Or we could just start with Sukkah. No, we can, no, you
Okay.
carry on.
Good.
You carry on. We'll say the Hadran after.
Okay. Very
Some
good.
people.
Okay.
No?
Are people who insist on saying, say the Hadran now.
Hadran now.
That's fine.
No, Rishon.
Okay. No, just.
Oh, it's not
I
gonna
don't
be
have
here.
it. I don't have it. I might.
Mine is tiny.
All right, I'll hold this. You said. So you're not saying it?
No, I actually have jet lag. I have to catch up.
Okay, so what should I do? Should I
I don't
video
know.
everybody?
I don't know. Maybe you can video us.
Can we say it together?
You can video us?
Yeah, let's all
Go
say
for it.
together.
Yes.
You want me to just like do this?
Right.
There isn't. Okay, ready? Except this is Sukkah.
Okay, go.
Adrana Yoma Vajatana. Atana La Masaka Yoma Vajatana. Lo Nitna Shemina, Masaka Yoma, Lo Titna Shemina, Lo Baal Mountain, Lo Baal. Atana La Masaka Yoma Vajatana. Atana La Masaka Yoma Vajatana. Lo Nitna Shemina, Masaka Yoma, Lo Titna Shemina, Lo Baal Mountain, Lo Baal Mountain. Here. I don't know what I said there. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, amen, amen. Modim anachnu b'nach Adonai Eloheinu ששמת חלקנו מיושבי בית המקדש, ולא שמת חלקנו מיושבי קרנות. אנו משכימים והם משכימים. אנו משכימים לזירי תורה והם משכימים לזרעים בטלים. אנו עמלים והם עמלים. אנו עמלים ומקבלים שכר והם עמלים ואינם מקבלים שכר. אנו רצים והם רצים. אנו רצים לחיי העולם הבא והם רצים לבאר שנאמר ואתה אלוהים תוריתם ושחק אנשי ג'מים ומחה לא יחצו ימיהם ויתרחב. יהי רצון לפניך אדוני כשם שעשית בישראל Masechet Yoma. Hey, Catherine. Sorry. וסיימה ללמוד קורטי תמוז רצח ההלכה. וזכות כל התנאים והאמוראים וצמתי חכמים ילמוד בי ובזרים. שלא תמוז ומפי זרים. להתקיים בי והקיצות היא תשיחך. ליבי ירבו ימיך וסיפך שנות ימים. אורך ימי ימינה ובשמאלה עושר וכבוד. אדוני עוז לעמו יפן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום.
Skoyach.
Thank you.
Sukkah.
And we go lofty again.
Yay.
Okay.
Heading for flags.
No, I'm saying we'll go back to the Okay, good. Okay. Masechet Sukkah. Very quick overview of Masechet Sukkah. Masechet Sukkah is made up of 5 prakim. And they are as elegantly divided and clear as you could have, right? Remember, Yoma, the first 7 prakim were sequential, but lots of tangents. You notice that in the Mishnah, there are lots of tangents because, let's face it, there aren't 7 prakim worth of material on Yoma itself. And Yoma was a great opportunity to talk about the daily avodah and so many stafuyot about that, including issues of location and of the kior and all those people who did good things and did bad things, etc. Masechet Sukkah is far more focused in that sense, and its breakdown is clearly not sequential. There's no sequentiality to it, the meaning of chronological sequencing. The first parak is about the definitions of a sukkah. The second parak is about mitzvah yeshivat sukkah. The third parak is about arba minim. It's like really straightforward. And the third parak is a mastery of elegance in that it has 4 mishnayot in it. They follow exact same pattern. Lulav gazul, etrog gazul, hadas gazul. I did it out of order. Arva gzula. And list the whole thing, a set of things that are pasul, and then the unique things in each mean that would be problematic. The fourth parak is sort of a combination of how all the different components of Sukkot come together, including the Arba Minim, including Sukkah, and then we're introduced to other elements of Sukkot, including Simchat Beit HaShoeva. Hallel is thrown in there, and it opens up the door for all sorts of great sugyot dealing with klali issues of brachot. There's a sugya of chinuch there, and then the fifth parak is sort of a practicum of the way that Sukkot was celebrated in the Beit HaMikdash. There are a significant amount of agadot that are in the fifth parak. The rest of the Masachet is not agadah heavy, unlike Yoma, which had some really big agadic sections. By the way, just parenthetically, this is, I don't get anything back for this, but a teacher here at Michal Herzog just published a book on the agadot in Masachet Yoma, which is fabulous. I got it as soon as I got it picked up here and sent the first person who was coming back with a mask. Dr. Yonatan Feintuch, Be'anan Era'eh, I think it's called. And he goes through some of the agadot. It's included articles that he already published in other places, but he redid them. It's fabulous. Goes through the sugya of the Ani Ashir and the Rasha, that come right. Great piece. He goes through the issue of Shimon HaTzadik, meaning Alexander. Great piece. He goes through the issue of the woman at the end of the third parak with her child who first is dressing him in the gold, and then great stuff, great treatment.
Just see the video?
Great. I think that one or two of the pieces is there in an embryonic form. Right. Yeah. Right. So anyway, Sukkah.
Keep
now-
sneaking back to Yoma.
Sorry, what? Why did we not study Rosh Hashanah before Yoma? The first of all, the order that Daf Yomi set up its calendar in is not necessarily the order either of the Masechtot of the Mishnah or the Masechtot of the Gemara. I mean, the order of the Masechtot of the Gemara is also not, it's not Messina. And you find different versions of the orders, especially in Nashim and Moed. Find that. Rosh Hashanah, you have to remember, is not about Rosh Hashanah. Right? What's Rosh Hashanah mainly about? not Kiddush HaChodesh. Rosh Hashanah is there secondarily. Rosh Hashanah itself takes up about a parak and a half of the Masachet. So it's part of the what you find in every Seder, but certainly in Moed. You find that the second half, the Masechtot toward the second half of the Seder are shorter, and they typically include a short bit about the thing itself and appropriate tangents. So you find Megillah, for instance, is mainly about Kriyat Torah, or a lot of it. Chagigah is about Tumah V'Tahara. It's all over the place. The Masechtot at the beginning are much more focused, and they cover much more material about that topic. So the topics that are general. So for instance, when you get to Kiddushin, at the end of Seder Nashim, you find that there's very little about Kiddushin. Kiddushin itself takes up about a parak and a half. And the 4 prakim are also some other things. Part of the reason is because most of the topics that would be covered, they were already covered in Ketubot and to some extent Yevamot and a little bit in Gittin. So
I also thought they were in order of like the numbers of
Yes.
yeah. So question is, what came first? In other words, did Rebbe say, okay, I'm going to put the Seder of the Masechtot? Unclear if he did, because you find even among the Rishonim different orders of the Masechtot. Right? Masechet Sota, for instance, comes after Masechet Gittin, and I think the Meiri, I believe. So unclear how it's gehalten again. Vizokman is good. I just have to tell you the Vizokman story. It's very quick. Years ago, I went to a friend's wedding, and the guy is a Chassidish guy. He's from Rebbe stock, and a beautiful wedding. I was invited to the Zev Brachot 2 days later. It was in Young Israel Flap of Avenue K, everybody knows, and there was half the people there were Yiddish speakers, half the people were not, and there was a Rebbe table, and one of the Rebbes got up to speak for 20 minutes in Yiddish. Half the audience immediately went to sleep. I'm able to follow. I was following Yiddish, and in the middle of it, and the whole thing was in Yiddish, and half the audience was asleep. I mean, obviously asleep. You know, you needed earmuffs to snoring. And so he was talking, and he's going through, and the funniest thing, he in the middle he says, and then he turns to the father, he's the intellectual among the group because he knows English, and he turns to him and he says, "Vizokman apagam." So he says, blemish. So, a blemish, and he goes on. And I'm wondering, like, who'd you say that for? The people who understand you know what a gum is. Everybody else is asleep, and they wouldn't get it anyways. So, anyways, anyhow, Sukkah. Sukkah shigbo alamala mi'asrimama. Asrimama is a measure that we're going to see used in several contexts. Where do you know asrimama for as a height limitation?
That's the big.
Everyone.
Cool.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe.
no,
Right.
everyone.
But where do we know it from in practical halacha for us? Chanukah, right? And one other area, which is less known,
Everyone.
but a korah of an eruv can't be over 20 amot high. They all seem to come from the same place, which is people have to be aware of them. And above 20 amot high seems to be beyond people's awareness. Remember, we're living in a time when nothing was happening up in the air, so you didn't look up. Right? We look up, we see an airplane, we see balloons, we see whatever it may be, it's, mileage. Anyways, Sukkah Vuala, which means the schach is 20 amot high or higher. Sula, right? Rabbi Yehuda Machshir. So Machloket right now, whether or not, we don't know that Rabbi Yehuda has some limit that's higher, or he says, I don't care, there's no limit. We don't know. I'll go on the opposite side. If Sukkah is lower than 10 tefachim high, which is, a Sukkah for a couple of rodents, it's tiny, right? Or for somebody who's crawling in. You all know the story, tell. Okay, I'll tell you later. Okay. Now you can see this is a great Mishnah to start the parak because it's laying out all of the boundaries, which is too high, too low, too narrow, and too much sun. And then the rest of the parak is going to just take that apart. It's a great opening. All right, good. We're all familiar with the terms. Okay, now, Tanan Hatam. And again, the first thing that the Sugya does is to compare Esri Mama circumstances. Tanan Hatam, in the beginning of Eruvin, Mavui Shuhu Gavoa Me Lamala Me Esri Mama Yimma 8. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Eno Tzarich. Now, two things immediately you see. One is that instead of Psula, Yimma 8. In other words, instead of passing judgment on it, instead, there's the repair given. The second thing that Rabbi Yehuda, again, seems to say 20 amot doesn't bother. So is there a consistent shita, or is it just happenstance that he disagrees again? So Ma'ishta Gabe Sukkah Detani Psula, Ma'ishta Gabe Mavui Detani Takanta. That's the obvious question is how come the Mishnah uses the word psula when it comes to sukkah, which just knocks it out, and which you could have said Yoma, just lower the schach. Whereas with mavui, it says Yoma. Now, by the way, there's a simple answer to this, which is that a sukkah is already a structure. What? We're not talking about the mavui, we're talking about the korah. The korah, all you have to do is lower where the korah is, right? As opposed to the sukkah, which is already built. That's why I think psula versus Yoma. But they give a different answer, which is sukkah de oraita tani psula mavui de rabbanan tani takanta. What they really mean by that is you can't say pasul about a mavui. A mavui is not a halachic structure. A mavui is a civic structure. It's an urban structure. And so there's nothing to say pasul. Sukkah is a halachic structure that either is kasher or pasul. So they're saying that in a different way, but that mavui, since it's Rabbanan, tani takanta. V'bayit ema v'doraita nami tani takanta. Right? So the truth is that sometimes with the doraita, we'll also say, fix it this way, fix it that way. Mi'usukkah denafish mile pasik v'tani psula. He says the sukkah has all sorts of other things with it. So in order to make it just a clear ruling, say pasul. Other things that might have only one component, we'll say, here's how you fix it. I think that also the structural component may play a role. Mavui de lonafish mile tani takanta. Again, mavui, just lower the korah. It's very simple. A mavui doesn't have to be a certain thickness. It doesn't have to have shade. It doesn't have to, it just basically, we're talking about the wall of the mavui. But a mavui is the alleyway. We're talking about the entrance to the thing. Right. So the korah, you lower the korah. I mean, these are fixed. Right. It's not that it takes work, but it's one thing. Okay, minahani mili. And this is the thing that's not going to occupy us for the rest of this thing. Minahani mili, meaning what's the source of the height requirement at all that we're saying pasul? Right? Amar Rabba Damar Kra. And by the way, they don't double back to mavui here. In other words, they don't say, well, let's see what the rule for mavui is, because clearly sukkah is going to drive this cart, not ride in it. Because sukkahs don't ride. If mavui is all it's connected to sukkah, it's as a hitcher. So right, that's confused. Okay, Amar Rabba, 3 opinions here. Ready? Amar Kra, Lamani du dorotechem kiva sukkot toshav tibnei Israel v'otziyotam mitzrayim. The end of the Parshat Moadim ends with they have to sit in the sukkot, calls out to Israel. Yeshuva sukkot. Why? That you all know that I made you sit in sukkot, right? Which means sukkah is about awareness of the sukkah. Now, when you say sukkah, what do you mean? When you say the word sukkah, what do you mean? So I'll remind you of the best answer you can ever give to any question you ever asked. Ironclad, always the best answer. What's the best answer? No, it depends. The answer is it depends. Try it. It depends, right? My wife gives it to me all the time. I say, you going to the store? She said, it depends, right? What do you want me to get? Right? It depends. When you say sukkah, what do you mean? Oh, so that.
More sun, more shade.
Which is exactly
Okay.
the answer to your question.
Exactly.
Right, which is very good. So what does sukkah mean? So it depends. If you're talking about the structure, then you're talking about the building. But in this context, what we actually mean is the schach. Right? Sukkah shigvor l'malam me'asher. What we mean is that the schach is 120, and Rabbah is picking up on that because it's l'manu d'kiva sukkot shavti, which means you have to be aware of the sukkah, meaning you're aware of the schach. Okay, so
The sukkah could be short.
I was
And
wondering,
like, what does that
space
mean?
allowance.
What do you mean?
The top
What
of
do
the
you
wall.
mean that the spot, you're talking about the spot?
when you say the word sukkah here, right? Look at the opening line of the Mishnah. Sukkah shigvor l'malam me'asher. What that actually means is the schach. The schach is above 20.
But the spot to be above 20, the wall has to be above.
No, but they can be more than that.
Correct, but the walls themselves could be 19 high. The walls could be 19 high. And then you could have little sticks that are 1 tefach high, a couple tefachim high, and the schach on top of it. You still have a sukkah that's more than 20. Because this means schach, right? I agree with you, but I just want to sensitize you that throughout the first parak, the word sukkah is going to be used a little bit flexibly, just to hear that. Okay, so Rabbah says the reason is the mani du dorotechem kiva sukkot l'shav bnei Israel ad 20 ama adam yodeh shudar b'sukkah. Right, so if it's within 20 amot, you're aware of the schach. L'mal mi 20 ama ein adam yodeh shudar b'sukkah. Mishum lo shalta be'ena. And that, of course, is the reason that Masachet Shabbat gives for the three areas, Hanukkah, Mavui, and Sukkah, because people aren't aware of it. But in Sukkah, it's only one of the reasons given, and we'll see that it's not so simple. I think none of these reasons are going to come out so blank. Again, I got to need a Yiddish translator here. Rabbi Zera Amar Mehacha, he says a different pasuk, and his pasuk is from a stranger place. To take the key pasuk about Sukkah in Vayikra and use it is great. Instead, he takes a pasuk from Yeshayahu about Atid Lavo, the Sukkah Tiyel Etzel Yomam Mechorev. Right? In the future, there will be a Sukkah that will protect us from the withering heat. Right? Whatever that may mean again in messianic terms. And this, of course, very much depends on the size of the sukkah. If you're sitting in a very narrow sukkah and the schach is very high, and you got tfanot going all the way up, your shade is not provided by the schach; it's provided by the tfanot. By the way, you could be sitting in a minimal sukkah, and you would get shade from the tfanot, even if it was 10 amot high, right? Depending how big your sukkah is, right? So Rabbi Zera's point is that if you have the schach is more than 20 amot high, you're no longer sitting in the shade of the schach, but in the shade of the tfanot, right? And that's the thing. So he says sukkah is defined by giving shade, but the schach giving shade. As the Malam Yasrim, you're not. But of course, the answer would be, well, what if you are in the sukkah, the Plaza Hotel, or some hotel, which is huge, King David, huge sukkah. You could theoretically have it be 100 amot high. You're still sitting on the schach because it's that wide, right? And that's a Gemara brings this up.
It's also the question on the first reason, meaning when you're in one of those enormous sukkahs,
Yeah.
you don't feel like it's just sukkah. When you're in that King David sukkah.
Even if it's less than 20 high. Right. Good. So what does Shalta Ba'ena mean? Does it mean that you're not constantly aware of it? Or is it that you're not naturally going to once in a while lift your head up and see it? I don't know. I don't know what Shalta Ba'ena means. Nope.
No,
Nope. So you in the second paragraph, you'll see it.
because you can always look up and see the schach, meaning, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Thank
just saying, if you look up, you realize you're in a sukkah. I think that's the point. It's not about the walls as much as it is the roof.
Figure out this. I'm talking to you right now in the King David Sukkah. Imagine, it's beautiful, right? And my eyes could very easily do this and see it. If it's 50 amot high, my eyes won't see it. That's, I think, what's being said. The fact that it's such a broad sukkah makes you forget you're not in some small little hut. But I'm not sure there has to be a small little hut. Right. Okay.
The town's Fanot is also
What?
Rav Kook's shul and on Rav Kook in his house. That roof was a movable roof.
Right. Right. Mhm. No,
Do you think
that's not come up, but you felt like you were in the room. I remember I was there once for some Chapet. That's right. You felt like you were in the regular room. Yeah, but it was not 20 amot.
No.
Right. But I think there's a different thing. Coming back to what Shuli was saying is you don't really feel like you're in a sukkah. You're in a regular room. And you have to look up to notice that it's grassy.
If you go back to the midbar, the idea is the ananei kavod were around the machaneh.
If it's in
if
again,
it's-
good question.
Again,
There's
it's
about
just
6 different opinions about what Sukkot is here. Right?
one opinion
One
would
opinion is
be
ananei
that it's
kavod.
around the entire machaneh. It's
The
very
question is-
different than our.
Right. Whether the ananei kavod are around or
Yeah.
on top.
Yeah.
Also another question.
sales
Yeah.
and Fanot also depends on time of day.
Yeah, sure.
And how close you are to the wall. We
Sure.
don't have any
And we generally judge the holy Shem Chamatamu Vamitzvot noon.
noon,
Right.
right? But even that depends on where you are on Earth.
Right. I mean, think about this. If your sukkah is regular, let's say totally outside with all 4 directions available, at sunrise and sunset, you are not sitting B'tzel Sukkah anyways, no matter what the size is. It's only going to be around midday that it's B'tzel Schach. Right. So it's an imperfect thing. So now, I'm really Abaye, so Abaye challenges this as follows. So let's say that you make your schach literally. Ashur Kanayim was mentioned in Second Barim as it's a very hard place, but the idea is that let's say you build your sukkah between 2 very solid places, right? And then your schach is on top, so you're not. So the most of the tzell is coming from these places. So in other words, it wouldn't be. It would be also pasul, and we told that that's not the issue. He says, here's the difference. If you take away the Ashrot Kanayim, then you still have Tsel Sukkah because the Sukkah is low enough. But if you have, let's say, a small but very high Sukkah with regular Tfanot, you take the Tfanot away, you're sitting in the sun. You're sitting in the sun. I first understood what a Sukkah was. I mean, obviously, as a little kid, I did. I first understood what a Sukkah was in real terms in 1982. I was when I wasn't a little kid anymore. When I was visiting a friend in Katif, and we took the bypass road and drove past some fields. It was Pesach time, and I saw Sukkot there. They're totally pasul and off season, but what they were 4 poles, very high, with some thatched stuff on top. And I asked what it was. He said, well, the Aravim will come out to work. They come out at 5 in the morning. They work till about 11, and then they find the shade underneath that. Probably have to keep shifting, have their lunch, take a rest, and when it's a little cooler, they come out and work again. I understood the Sukkot work, but then you get this whole the rule of itself. So, and that may be why midday becomes the measure. Notice that now to have 3 opinions as not nishkaferla. It's no big deal to have 3 different opinions about what the source is for halakha. We don't know. The problem is going to be when these opinions now help define not just the source, but then the contours of the halakha. Okay, so here we go. For instance, the Rabbas is awareness. So if you were able to create something that was 30 high, but there was awareness, like you put sparkly lights up there, with that would solve Rabbah, wouldn't solve Rab Zera. Okay, let's see. The third opinion is Basukot Teshvu Shivat Yamim. This is Rabbah. Very famous piece. It's going to course through Sukkah, but you have to determine how much of this exists in this wording, at least before Rav himself. Amrat Torah Kol Shivat Yamim. Same dirat keva v'shev v'dirat arai, right? And then the idea is ad esrimama adam oseh dirato dirat arai. Now I want you to imagine what he's saying: that a person will build a lean-to, a temporary hut, up to 30 feet high. All right. So he said, by definition, having a higher roof than that is dirat keva, right? Which comes back to the hut issue. But then again, you have a big problem with that is, so what if,
because
yeah, just like you're not going to do that for a temporary thing. I have to be honest with you, I wouldn't do 30 feet or even 20 feet for a temporary thing. Exactly, exactly, right? And I brought my couch out and I got the TV there and I'm watching movies and having a great party. But, you know, I want to make sure that it looks like a dirat arai by having lower schach. You're right, it's strange. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye again is on the attack. Barzel. Your question. And again, it's all based on the premise that, of course, it's a sukkah. Ashrot Kanaim is a sukkah, and Mechitzot Shel Barzel is a sukkah. In other words, having the walls be strong, having the walls be solid, having the painted thing and the TV and the popcorn maker in there is all not a problem. So the idea of it has to be dirat arai in the sense that nobody would ever, which is, by the way, the opposite. We actually, for the most part, populate and furnish our sukkot in ways that nobody would do a temporary, which is sort of the point. So, he said, so this is what I meant. On Esrim Amad, the Adamo said dirato dirat arai, he obviously dirat keva naming. So now, Rava, sorry for saying this, is backpedaling a little bit. He says, what I meant was this, that since nobody would ever make a dirat arai more than 20 amot high, therefore, that's automatically out. But since 20 amot is the max that would make a dirat arai, once you do it that way and you make the sukkah itself with the popcorn maker and the coffee maker, right, then it's okay. All right. Now, by the way, I think what you see here is nobody really knows why there's a limit of 20 amot. Because if they did, there wouldn't be the answer. And everyone in the answers, by the way, is challenging. All right, good. So now, good. So now, Kulu Karaba. Now we're going to analyze these 3 opinions. Rabba was the first one. Lamani do dorotechem. Kulu Karaba lo amri. Nobody else agreed with Rabba about Lamani do dorotechem. Why? Hu yediala doroti. Lamani do dorotechem is not defining the mitzvah of sukkah. The sukkah has to be built in a way that everybody's aware of it. It is, you're supposed to live in Sukkot so that in future generations, they will know that this is how I took you out. You know, it's the purpose of the mitzvah is exactly what we tell our kids in the sukkah. This is how we left Mitzrayim, right? However we frame it. Is there a Nami Lomer? Is there was the cell? We don't agree with him. Because that pasuk is a messianic pasuk. It's using the word sukkah, which is a word that we know of from before Sukkot, like Yaakov builds Sukkot. So it's using it that way. Don't take it halachically. So he said, then if that was the case, then Yeshayahu would not have used the word sukkah. He would have used the word chuppah or something else that doesn't border on halachic categories like that. Of course, if he said chuppah tiyel etzal yomam, suddenly you'd have also to do sugyot and kedushin. But sukkah tiyel etzal yomam, the fact that Yeshayahu picked that pasuk, that word to use, means that he's hinting to the fact that the purpose of a sukkah is itself. Okay. Kirava nami loam. Right, Rava was the one who said that dirat keva. Why? Lishum kusha Abaya, because Abaya's question is very good, which is Shuli's question, which is the painted walls and the fancy tables and everything else we bring in. Now we see why every opinion has its shatter point. Come on,
There's an idea that there's a halachic description of something that doesn't always jive with reality.
right?
Like in kashrut, like there's halachic noten tam, right?
Yeah,
That we have problems with, tuna fish canning and things like that.
right,
That no one in the right mind would say noten tam,
right.
right? So here you're saying there's a halachic definition of a sukkah and of a dirat arai, and there's what we come to think of as what we do for a dirat arai.
So you're saying where halachic conceptual definitions don't fit with reality,
Often.
right? Yeah, for sure it's the case. Yeah, for sure it's the case. But that's where we're dealing with conceptual
So I'm saying, I think
frameworks.
that's what the give and take here is. the dirat arai.
To some extent, yeah. Abaya's question actually pokes to the concept. He says reality is people, we do build things that nobody would do for dirat arai, and because they're less than 20, that makes it okay. Your definition is weak. That's what he's checking Rava on conceptual grounds. All right, so now Kamana Azla Hada Amar Rabbi Yoshia Amar Rav. All right, so we have the following statement. We got to see which one of the three opinions is going to fit with this. Now, notice again, now they're taking the three opinions and saying there are halachic differences between these opinions. Let's see how it plays out. Machloket b'shein tfanot megiot l'schach. This whole machloket Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim is only if the walls don't reach the schach. Aval tfanot megiot l'schach afilu mal me'asur amak shira. Everybody would agree that's okay higher than 20. And by the way, we don't hear until 30 or until 35. Sounds like sky's the limit, literally. As long as the walls reach it. So which opinion does that fit? Only one opinion. And that's Rabbah, awareness. Because the cell thing isn't solved by having the tfanot, either of it. The tfanot make it harder for the cell. And the dirat keva is the same problem. Karabba. And now this, by the way, is a very interesting take on visual awareness and peripheral vision. How does that work? In other words, what does it mean, lo shalta be'ena? Does it mean, well, I'm not noticing the power lines above because I'm looking at the tree, or my eyes automatically catch it, but if the power lines are way higher, I wouldn't see them. But if the tree were very tall, I'd see the power lines because I'm always looking at the tree and I'm going to follow it all the way up. Maybe. But this, by the way, is a halachic position. And we're saying this halachic position will only work according to Rabbi's explanation. Okay? Remember, we talked about this. What if the sukkah is relatively minimal size? I'm going to get right now into what the minimal size is. So if it's a bigger sukkah, King David, then higher than 20 is good. Who does that fit? That fits the shade problem, right? Rabbah would not agree. Rabbah would say the fact that your sukkah is big, then the fact that the schach is high, you still don't see it. But if it's a cell problem, the bigger the sukkah, the less likely the tfanot are going to be the cause of the cell. Come on, Rabbi Zera, damishun cell. The cave under Vicha, ikat cell sukkah. Good. Come on, Azadam Rav Achanan Baraba Amarav. Machloket b'shem machzeket elokadei rishon krubo v'shulchano. Now this is the machloket. Again, our machloket Mishnah, but he defines it differently. And there is a discussion we're going to get to mainly in the second pair about the minimal size of the sukkah, area-wise, about whether it's Maseket, Rosho, Rubo, Rosho, Rubo, Shulchan, and story with Beit Tam and Hillel, it's in Nebi Cham and Hillel, or Arbamot, right? So, so command the lo kechad. So this they say it doesn't actually fit anybody, because if you say it's minimal, but it's enough just for you to sit there with your table, and most of your body can fit in there. It's very, very small. Then it could be super high, right? Which, by the way, is kind of weird, because if it's smaller than that, it might not be kosher to start with. It's a different problem. Now, he could be picking up on the phrase psula. Remember how we explained psula? One of the two explanations. Why psula instead of Yimayit? He said not bishmile. So if you say that the machloket about height is only in a super small sukkah, maybe you got two problems here, bud. It's too high and too small. And that might be able to say psula, because just, you say that. So the answer is that doesn't fit anybody. It certainly doesn't fit Rabbah, because the fact that it's a little wider doesn't help with that. It's not wide enough to make the cell change. And it's certainly not wide enough to change the Dirat Keva thing. You just got a really screwy thing where you got a tiny little thing that's super high. So it's like Dirat Keva on the height and super Dirat Arai on the width. Right? So you got a schizophrenic. So, okay, now, right? Now, Rabbi Yoshia, who was the one who said the machloket is that Tfanot Yom. So he's at odds with the last opinion. Right? Because remember, Rav Yoshia said the issue is the height, meaning the walls reach the top. And that's the issue. But the last two that we saw were defining the machloket is only about the width, and they gave two different shirim for the width. One was Alamot, one was Rosh Ruvav Shulchan. Right? You get that. Rabba, name of extra sukkah involved. It sounds like they're just disagreeing about the minimal area of a sukkah. Arba mot or Rosh Rubo Shulchan. By the way, what do you think would be bigger? Arba mot or Rosh Rubo Shulchan? I think Arba mot by definition, because we say the model is that a person's girth is 1 amah, right? And it's Rosh Rubo. It doesn't mean whole body doesn't have to be in there. Right, and Shulchan could be a tiny little tray. So, yeah,
talks about how their way of eating was reclining. We know. So then
right.
It's not like we're picturing the guy with the little card table. He used to actually lie down.
Yeah, but why do we think reclining?
That's how they ate.
Except they ate that way when? Not all the time. They only ate that way at festive meals. At festive meals. If you're sitting alone, it's not a festive meal. No, you're sitting alone. That's why I'm not sure that. Now, the whole point of Haseba is Nasov from Shmuel and Beit Lachem, right? No Nasov ad Ba'al. I don't think there's Haseba when you're sitting alone. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
That's where you get the Rubo, because you need him mostly inside. And
yeah, but Rosh Rubo just means
what Rubo is.
Right.
Yeah, but
Length
I
or-
don't.
No, I'm saying.
Yeah.
Haseba is difficult. But even so, I think it's less
Okay.
than Narba.
Okay.
Right. Anyways, Demar Sab, where does Rashi say? Yeah, that's okay. All right. I just don't understand Haseba when you're alone, because that's not good. Because the whole point of Haseba is you're at a festive meeting with people sitting around a circle. But again, Haseba was part of a festive meal when you're sitting around in a circle. That's what Haseba means. Haseba doesn't mean leaning; it means being in a circle. They ate alone. They didn't do. Again, Haseba was part of the festive meal. It wasn't like when you eat. I don't think.
But it wasn't 50.
But you're sitting alone. Right? No, what I mean by festive is communal. I think. I don't know. Okay. Surely, I'm sure you'll find somewhere. You'll find a one bed somewhere that's good. Okay. Well, we don't want to do that because we have the machloket later. And everybody agrees that that's the minimum one, although we're going to later come up with a different shear. Their machloket is not about the size of the sukkah. Everybody agrees that the smaller size Rosh Hashanah Shulchan Aruch is the minimal size. By the way, this will not work if Abamot is smaller. What we're just saying. They agree that the minimal size is Rosh Hashanah Shulchan Aruch, right? Aval yoter Rosh Hashanah Shulchan Aruch divra kol kshira. Rosh Hashanah Shulchan Aruch adalamot pligi. So that the machloket is narrow. Sorry for the pun, but yeah, but that according to the first opinion, the minute that it's past the super minimal size, then everybody agrees it can be taller. And the second opinion is no, for that sliver between Rosh Hashanah and Shulchan Aruch until Daled Amot they disagree. After Amot they all agree to be taller, which again is a relatively small difference, but it's a difference. But Meiteve, watch this challenge. Sukashi Guam Mamalam Esiyoma Sulav Yuda Machshir Ad Arba'im V'Chamishim Amat. Now in this Breita we hear Rabbi Yehuda actually giving an alternative amount, which by the way is very unfair because it's 44.50. What's that mean? Right? Okay. It's very high, but what's 40 or 50? What does that mean?
If you're going to give a maximum, give one number, not two numbers.
I'm Rabbi Yehuda. Maaseh. Now we got a story. Let's finish this story. Maaseh Eleni Amalka. You know what Eleni Amalka was? From Chadiav, right? Her son was. Moonbaz. Seems like a great thing for kids. Hey guys, you want to play on the Moonbaz? But you know, she was a convert, and famous story with her in Nazir. She became a Sirah, met for 21 years, right? Belod, she wasn't actually a queen at this point, meaning she was a queen over in Chadiav. She wasn't a queen here, but she made Aliyah. So, but still called her Helena Malka. She's still a lady. What? Oh, good. Very good. Excellent. Right.
Learning Gemara.
Yeah. All right. Anyways, very good. Okay. Now, what does that mean, lo amru la davar? They didn't protest. In other words, just took those, they didn't say anything. The assumption is the rabbi sees something. This is, by the way, an assumption a lot of people make, and it's not always a safe one. The rabbi sees something that's questionable, doesn't say anything, must be okay. Right? Good. What?
They're scared of the board. That's it.
Yeah, we're getting that right now. You're right on. Amrulo, right? So they said back to Rabbi Yehuda is using this as a proof that 20 amot is not the max. We have a story. By the way, Chachamim don't disagree with the story. They could disagree with the story. Say the story didn't happen. It didn't happen that way. Alan Malka went to visit them. And it could be, right? And it was smaller. Amrulo misham ra'aya yishayta ufturamina sukkah. I told you it's coming up, right? Now, by the way, does this solve the problem? Amar lahen v'alo shiv'am banim havula. Now, the assumption is she's hanging out with her kids, and she has 7 sons, right? Okay, so now the odd koma selo asta el api chachamim. They add another line in, which is she was always very careful to do everything according to chachamim. What does that mean according to chachamim? It means one of 2 possible things. It could mean that whatever she did, she asked a shayla. It could also mean she was careful about darabanan. Not the same thing, right? Api chachamim. Normally, we think it means you'd ask. I won't do anything without asking. But the other one may be she was careful to follow the Rabbanan. You'll see why I'm saying that.
Yes, does that imply that women are higher than
No, not necessarily. You'll see. Right. Why add that second again? Right? Because this is what Rabbi Yehuda said back to them. So maybe you'll say that she had 7 sons. We all agree, but her 7 sons were all ktanim. That's not going to work. Why? Because none of them were twins. Okay, if none of them were twins, then how old is at least the oldest? Probably what? 8 or 9, and that's assuming, okay, right? Came on the Shiva, assuming Seder Olam kind of thing. Came on the Shiva, certainly, since the halakha, as we'll see in the second paragraph, is Katan Shenot Tzarich Limo Chayav Sukkah Mid Rabbanan. Okay, now you see that. You could say she doesn't care about the Rabbanan. See, normally we would interpret that phrase as meaning she asks Sheilot. But here it clearly doesn't mean that. here, at least the way they're interpreting it is that she was careful about the Rabbanans. Therefore, if she had a kid who was over 6 or 7, whatever the age is, she'd make sure he sat in a proper sukkah, not on, a steak and a lemon as a lulav. It's a proper sukkah, and there, it's kosher sukkah. And therefore, if the chachamim come in and see her with her sons who are already old enough to make a difference, and the sukkah is way high, and they don't say anything, must be way high, is okay. All right? So therefore, so if you say that first approach of Yeshua, who said that the machloket of Yonah Chachamim is only if the tfanot don't reach the schach, then clearly that this is easy. You think she's going to be sitting she's a rich woman. She's not going to be sitting in a sukkah that's like that. And therefore, Chachamim didn't say anything because now we all agree that 40, 50 high is fine. And Rav Yehuda, you haven't made your point because you're trying to make your point, according to this, that even a sukkah that the tfanot don't reach the schach, over 20 is okay. And that wasn't the case here. She's a wealthy woman. She had a special sukkah, right? So then the answer is not necessarily right, Mishum Avira, right? In other words, she's not going to have it that way because she doesn't want to let down hot air and whatever. But according to the second two approaches, the machloket is about a sukkah tana, either arbamot or shulchano, etc. What do you think? She's sitting in a tiny little sukkah, which means, by the way, according to all the different opinions, there's no proof here from the fact that the Chacham didn't say anything, because this is a sukkah that, according to every opinion, there should not be machloket. It could be super high because it's the tfanot magil l'schach and it's certainly very wide. What she had was little mini sukkot, like little chambers, right? Like that. She had a private little sukkah there for herself. So the Rabbanan say she was sitting there, but her sons were sitting in a proper sukkah with lower schach, and therefore the Chachamim the Zakenim came to visit her in this tiny little sukkah. They didn't say anything because she's patur and her sons weren't with her. She's sitting there privately because it's her own private little place, right? And and it's where she meets important people. So no, but her sons aren't there. Yehuda said, no, her sons are with her, and the Chacham didn't say anything to her because 40 or 50 high is fine, right? But the problem, of course, is that we're going to have to posit that either the sukkah was not tfanot legil l'schach, or that it was very narrow, right? So we're going to say this is a narrow sukkah, and her sons were with her in this narrow sukkah, like compartment sukkot, and they were in there. And nonetheless, Rav Yizt says they didn't say anything to her because you could have a sukkah that's much higher.
Thank you.
It's great to be back with you guys. Yeah, sure. No, that's Rabbi Yoshia. We have 3 different opinions about where the machloket happened, and we're not.
We just started. You want to look on the mouse that I got back?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Wait, did we take a picture? Yeah, sorry, let's take a picture before anybody moves. Picture. We already lost one of ours.
To take a picture.
Someone, I don't know, I'm going to sort this out, sorry.
Wait, Yitzz, can you take a picture for us?